Welcome back to the second half of Dateline New Haven. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our city tick. Well, Madeline Negrón has been making New Haven tick. She's just finishing her first year as the superintendent of the public schools in an era of much hope, challenge, and ambition. Dr. Negrón, thank you so much for coming in to visit Dateline New Haven.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you.
Great. I'm going to ask you to get so close to that mic. You're almost touching it, so everybody can hear you well. So how'd it go? You're closing out the first year. So much has happened. We're still recovering from the pandemic and pulling ahead. Urban schools are facing challenges around the country with budgets. You have a growing Latino population, which actually presents a lot of good kind of challenges. How did it go?
You know, I can't believe it's been a year. I'm already starting my second year in this role. It's just been amazing how fast it has gone. But I have to say, overall, I'm very proud of how well this year has gone and how welcoming I think the city of New Haven has been to my return in this new role.
You're saying return because you had worked your way up. Have you been a teacher here as well as an administrator?
Yes. In my young days, I had been a classroom teacher over at Career High School. I later returned to be the principal at Career High School and director of early childhood. So this is my third run.
And you grew up here, I forget?
No, I did not grow up here. I actually grew up in Willimantic.
Okay. Willimantic's always one of those places in Connecticut I don't really have a picture of. I remember the whole, I hate to say this, the heroin hotel thing in the 80s. And there's also a university there.
Eastern Connecticut University.
And it's a little bit, you got a lot of rural areas too up there.
Actually, you know, people that do not know, they imagine it to be so rural. But when you actually go into Willimantic, it's almost being in a very tiny New Haven.
Okay.
It's almost like a little city.
Did you like growing up there?
I actually did. I mean, I did have my challenges coming in at the age of 10, and now, you know, the population certainly did not look like me at the time. It has transformed over the years, but I have to say I was very grateful to walk into a school system that for me had a bilingual education program, which was a godsend.
And you've talked about that when those issues were raised, that you grew up speaking in a Spanish-speaking household. Did you come from Puerto Rico?
I came from Puerto Rico, only knowing my numbers and my colors and my survival phrases.
So what did it take to get you on a path where now you're superintendent of schools?
So again, I think I was fortunate to walk into a bilingual education program where I was able to continue to learn my content academics in Spanish as I was also learning English. And then being able to have support as I transition out of that program into the mainstream.
Okay. And so when you came, I had the fun opportunity to watch you the day after you were approved as superintendent. You visited Bassett School and you went around and you went to Cross. And you just had it was that moment of optimism when someone was excited about new challenges taking over. People were excited for you after we've had a lot of politics for years in New Haven. And we had the pandemic, sort of some new energy to get things done. Are you feeling that same way a year later?
I sure am. I am full of hope. I always believe in the power that public education has in transforming the lives of students. And that is why I do the work that I do.
What has surprised you in the job? Something that either proved to be more of a challenge than you thought it would be, or something that you saw we could really get this done?
So I did a lot of research when deciding to even apply for this job. I am very cognizant how challenging these roles are, and especially nowadays as so much has changed in public education.
How long does a typical superintendent serve now? Is it just like a couple of years?
I think it's just a couple of years.
It used to be a long time. Jerry Tarazi was here for like the school lifetime of kids.
You do not see those cases anymore because everything becomes so political. And I think people lose sight of what the role is, which we're here to serve kids and to make right by kids.
So you did that research, and you knew that before we had very divided political board of education. There were other agendas that made it impossible for one superintendent, to work. Another one came in with one faction against another. But you did come in, would you agree, at a time when we're not at that point? The Board of Ed does seem to be focused now on getting work done, but there isn't like a lot of fighting.
I have always believed in the power of the city from the moment when I first came here back in 1999 was the first time when I came as a classroom teacher and just saw the vibrancy of the city and how it becomes this beautiful blend of people. And for me, that is what's needed. It's first the ability and the mindset that this work can be done together. So I think that's the power that lies in the city, is that I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to see us do right by kids.
You said when I asked you what surprised you, you said you had done your research and you knew things were very political, and I unfortunately interrupted and took you away from continuing that thought. So where were you going with that in terms of what surprised you?
So again, when I did my research, I knew that this was still a place that had very dedicated and committed individuals to do the hard work in education. I also knew that I wasn't going to be walking into the same New Haven that I left, because we're just recovering from the pandemic, and the pandemic did quite a number on education. But I think it also allowed for opportunities. So I thought I had done my due diligence, looking at everything, doing a lot of talking, researching. But I have to admit, the one surprise, the one thing that I did not expect when I walked in was the conditions of our facilities.
That is a surprise, because you spent over $2 billion rebuilding almost every school, and they're kind of run down already.
It's sad to learn that a lot of that, I think, was because there was no preventative measures built. And when funds are tight, you're going to make cuts.
You're going to get through the year.
You're going to make cuts. And unfortunately, a lot of those cuts went into what it takes to maintain facilities.
And are we talking about
place.
HVAC systems? Are we talking about
I'm talking everything.
Painting? Are we talking about repairing staircases and elevators?
I'm talking the whole thing. Like right now, the amount of dollars that have been invested in our facilities is just enough to keep the lights on and to keep things running. But we know these buildings, right, have come of age, and they need a lot of repair. So now I think that was the one challenge that I was not expecting walking into this role. But again, I'm an optimistic, and I am here to work with community to solve issues. So now it's about, what are we going to do, knowing what we know about our facilities.
Well, there is no money, right?
There's not a lot of money.
I'm not just talking about New Haven. Everyone forgets to look at the country.
Everybody's struggling. Everybody's struggling, right? But I do believe that there's a way in which we have to revisit right now when we look at our enrollment. And when we look at the number of our facilities, do we indeed need to have the number of facilities that we currently have?
So if we have fewer facilities, we can spend the same amount of dollars to keep other facilities in better shape.
Probably dollars that can go, right, to continuing to support facilities that we know we can salvage, because they still have mechanical systems that have more life in them.
So you had Jay Brotman do a study about what is the long-term enrollment trend. And if I remember correctly, it's telling you that our enrollment's been declining and that it will continue to decline. So therefore, we can have fewer facilities and concentrate. Other people say be careful, because sometimes those predictions don't come true. We have a growing Latino population. It's not always officially recorded in the statistics, and maybe we'll find ourselves in a position. Do you feel confident that we can count on that trend so that we're not going to need to then get new facilities?
I do believe that we do have to be very cautious about that trend for exactly the same reasons that you just named. We know that data is telling us that that it's trending down, but we also see the high volume of new students that we receive year after year that is not accounted in that report.
It's kind of saying Afghanistan, not just Latin America.
Right.
Pakistan, yeah.
We have
it's kind of fun.
Yes, it's great to see such rich diversity in our system. So for those reasons, I think there could be a way in which we analyze all the data that we have and be able to determine then, not that we're going to say we're going to start closing down all of these buildings, but perhaps we can reduce the number while still allowing for room for growth.
Now, one trick is you look at Brookside, right? So that school, you had only 8 people graduating from 8th grade. So some people say, Dr. Negrón, why are you waiting a whole nother year if it's so obvious there aren't any kids there? But then you have another challenge, which is that's an isolated neighborhood. And without that school there's nothing right in the neighborhood. But then you have a third challenge that way predates you, is that we went to a system a generation ago to busing everyone to different schools where they want to go. The kids actually don't all walk to that school. Some kids spend 2 hours a day on buses to go to that school. So where does that leave us? Do we get rid of that school and keep our current system of it's not really about neighborhood based? Do we build up that school and close something else and convert to a more neighborhood based education? Where do we go with that?
I love your questioning, because I think you're building my point. And my point is that when people were saying, well, you have a very small enrollment there, just close it. When we did the analysis, just closing that one school, if we were to do it now, we still have students that we have to place elsewhere. We still have staff that we have to place elsewhere. At the end of the day, that was only going to amount less than $500,000 that we would have saved by closing that particular school. The second piece is that I am a fan that I am not going to arrive at decisions very hastily, that I need to consider multiple points of data. And number two, understanding that our schools are rooted in community. And these are things that you cannot do absent of your community. You have to bring community to the table. So right now, I am most interested in seeking out another assessment or facilities to determine, again, in terms of the mechanical systems, which ones do we know are pretty much done, which ones can still be salvaged. Take a look then at enrollment, take a look at zones as well. So how can we take a whole comprehensive view?
And why do we need a
where
second study if we just got a study on that?
Because that study only gave us that was like phase one of the study.
That was enrollment more?
That was more like enrollment, the physical plant. We need to dig deep into these mechanical systems inside of the facilities. That data is absent right now. I am not about to make recommendations that are not based on all the data that we need to inform the decisions.
Are you aiming for the school year after?
I am aiming for now to be able to soon be able to put an RFP out for someone to
That's
come
a
in
request for proposals.
and do this second phase of our facilities. So then armed with that data at hand and knowing what we know now that we have this, what I'm calling the NHPS Path to Excellence of our 5-year strategic operating plan, begin to engage with community to share out what we have so that we can make decisions about what this 10-year plan needs to look like in terms
so you
of
want
our
a 10-year
consolidation.
plan. Are you aiming to do that over this school year, like in complete?
I am aiming to get to that work this year now in 24-25.
Because that other question I brought up, I'm not hearing debated at all. So we kind of had a moment where this was really debated in the context of a mayoral election in 2001, where one vision was we want to go back to neighborhood schools that would really reduce the cost of busing and people part of schools. But that's not where the public was. The public was, they don't feel there are enough good schools for their children. So they like to have these schools of choice where one focuses on arts like Betsy Ross, one focuses on space like Scranton. And that those are opposite ideas. Do you think we might move back to neighborhood-based schools but try to get an investment to make them all good?
I think it begins by ensuring that we have great schools available for all of our students, regardless of the neighborhood in which they live, right? The other thing is continuing to build on our programming. So we know when kids are doing things that are based on their own interests, they're going to do better because that becomes a motivator for them. And thus the themes that we have in our magnet schools. So we do not want to lose that. So at the end of the day, it's about what does our teaching and learning look like inside of every school? What do those cultures look like inside of the school? And by that, I mean, do we have welcoming schools where every student can walk in and feel like they're seen and that they're heard?
Because Brookside was one of the first community schools in the 60s where the idea was not just the kids, but their parents would use the facility even after hours. And it was really tied to the neighborhood. We have gone away from that. Now you've gotten a federal grant where you're planning in Fairhaven, along with dozens of community groups, how to turn the two main Fairhaven K-8 schools there, if I have it right, into community schools where stuff takes place after school as well. The neighborhood's tied in. You have many immigrants there, so it's great. They're right there and they can walk. Is that going to be a test spot for how you look at the schools for the future?
So I think one clarification to make there is that, again, that is not our grant, right? Okay. That is the organization's grant. We happen to be...
Oh, Clifford Beer's got the grant, but they're working with you.
But they're working with us, right, in terms of the LEA in which they're going to be doing this work, in which we are extremely grateful, because I think it will allow us to be able to pilot things that we know make a lot of sense for community schools. So I think that will be an opportunity to decide, right, is that an approach in which we would like to go in the future? I think right now for me, it's all about how can I make our district financially sustainable with the resources that we have, knowing, right, that across the country, the resources are just not there and it's becoming more
So one idea you brought up for a start was if we don't have quite as many buildings, we can use our existing upkeep budget to do a better job and
I am a fan of ensuring that the resources that we do have, we are using them the most effective possible way to be able to stretch every dollar. I always tell folks, right, that's something that comes from my lived experience of growing up poor and seeing how you had to stretch every dollar that you had.
And we're talking to Dr. Madeline Negrón, who's the superintendent of schools for New Haven Public Schools. Daniel's been listening on Facebook. He had this question. Thank you, Daniel, for listening. Will Dr. Negrón be switching principals and assistant principals over the next several weeks?
So right now, I know that there are some changes as part of our right-sizing approach that will not pertain to my principals right now. It doesn't mean that in the future I will not be making those changes. Again, I am looking to make the best matches because I believe every educator has a set of skills, and I need to match the skills with the environments in which they're going to be better served.
So what does right sizing mean? We're not cutting the schools this year, so you're not going to have fewer principals. What kind of right sizing gets done in this environment?
So what I did is we took a look at the fact that we had many classrooms, and that was the beauty of walking in new and doing this myself, to be able to see and not have people telling me about it and me reading about it. I actually saw, and I saw that there were opportunities. Many of our schools had classrooms with very few kids, while other schools had a lot of students, and we were still short on finding teachers. So it became an opportunity to work with the unions to be able to, in the event that we could combine classes and still be within our contractual class size, to be able to do that, so that then I could take that individual and be able to put that classroom teacher in a school that was still needing a certified
and we have a
instructor.
shortage of teachers. So it's
We
not,
sure do.
So is that one way to deal with the shortage of teachers, to have fewer classes?
I think one way to deal is to maximize, again, that we have a certified teacher in front of all of our students. And if it means the fact that we used to have a classroom of 7 kids and another classroom of 8 kids, why not combine that to be a classroom of 15 kids with one certified teacher, when I can now take that teacher and send them to another place where they're needed?
All right. So you went to the White House.
Yes, I
Not
did.
bad for your first year.
I am so honored to be invited.
Why were you there? When did you go, and what happened?
All of a sudden, I got an invitation to go to a summit that was being done inside the White House, talking about chronic absenteeism. We know that across the country, right, we have all struggled since the pandemic to re-engage our students. So I was invited for that purpose.
And when was that?
I think this was in March, if I'm not
Was
mistaken.
this a Jill Biden thing?
No. This was basically it was, I forget which organization was doing it, but I know that the Secretary Cardona was one of the speakers there. They had different representatives from across the country. I was very impressed, for example, with the governor of Rhode Island that spoke about a comprehensive way in which they are looking at chronic absenteeism.
So we've done some of that. I went to your event at Daniels when you talked about having a quick response team under Joseph Lunker, where you're seeing who's not showing up. You talk to the families quick about why that's happening, what issues there are. It sounds to me like you heard some stuff we're not doing in Rhode Island when you talk about.
I think what impressed me about Rhode Island, it was the tight partnership that was happening all the way from the mayor's office to the State Department, all the way down to the schools and to the organizations.
And does that not happen the same way here?
I am great of the partnership that we have right now with our mayor, with the city, and the work that we do with our partners, right? And we have the Commission of Education also pushing. But I think it was impressive just to see how comprehensive it is.
Well, I
in
had
the
the
state of Rhode
sense
Island.
under the cheering that took place at Daniels that this was really a show for the visiting State Department Education Commissioner, and that you kind of want to show her how hard you're working on it, and that you got results, and that you want more help from the state. Did I read that wrong?
I think I wanted to, number one, celebrate the individuals that are working extremely hard, inclusive of our families who are sending kids to schools every day, and to show the state that, yes, we are going to take this very seriously, because we know the impact that it has every day that the child is not in that seat to access the teaching and the learning.
So we've greatly cut the absenteeism that had skyrocketed because we aimed to end the year at 27.5% chronic absenteeism. We ended at 37.5%. What do you take from that?
And there was a lot of work that happened, and I have to say what we did learn is you cannot ease off any day. So, for example, if I were to give you the data from the 2 weeks prior to the end of school, that percentage was a lot nicer than that 37.5. And in those last 2 weeks of school,
People showed up more then rather than less?
people showed up less.
Why? Oh, less.
Less. So it means that where we were looking at a 33.4%, immediately jumped up to that 37.5.
And also, I mean, goals are numbers you're, aiming toward.
Yes.
But why haven't we gone further to that overall?
I think it's extremely hard, right? The reality is that a lot of our students are still very disengaged. There are significant issues that families deal with. I am pleased with the number of resources that we have put into the strategy to, again, be able to go directly to the source and say, what are the challenges, what are the struggles, so that then we can bring about the wraparound supports that families often need to be able to ensure that the child is in school every day.
And teacher retention, we mentioned, I guess this is a problem lots of places. It's hard to compete with the suburbs for teacher salaries, and even they're having some trouble.
Yes.
What can we do about getting teachers of color in specific, but more teachers in general into the classrooms and keep the ones who are there?
I think it goes back to the climate that we create in the district and that we create in our schools. I think when teachers come in and they feel that they're being supported, that someone is interested in their professional aspirations, and that they see opportunities for them to continue to grow, I think that works for many educators. I know that it worked for me.
Tell me about that. How did you become a teacher?
Because again, I remember my first time going into teaching. I happened to do that in my own hometown of Willimantic at the time, where I was able to serve kids like me. That was very rewarding.
What subject did you teach?
I actually started in bilingual education. I wanted to teach kids that were walking in like me, struggling, right, with the English language, to be able to help them. And that is where I started in bilingual education, teaching mathematics and science, and also teaching Spanish as a second language.
So what kept you as a teacher that you could maybe think about in trying to keep other teachers?
I think for me was the passion that stemmed from my own lack of opportunities throughout my trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
There were times where I knew I had dreams to go to college and to be the first one in my family to do so. And I didn't have the opportunity that many kids had. And I did not. And I wanted to go into education to make that a change for kids like me. And that is why I am so passionate about the work that I do now.
The paraprofessionals, a lot of times people believe they make a good pool of potential teachers. They play such important roles already. They might not have the certification. Are we making any efforts to make it easier for paraprofessionals to move up to teachers?
I think I'm very pleased. First, the work that the district did, this was prior to my arrival. I know that they utilized a lot of the ESSER funding.
And that's the federal pandemic relief money.
Yes, the federal relief money that came in from the pandemic.
Isn't that funny, like a word like ESSER becomes something that
I know, it just becomes
those of us go to me, everyone uses it, but everyone else thinks like, whenever I'm editing, I'm thinking, well, most people never heard of ESSER. Is that like Dean Esserman?
Right, you are correct. But very proud that the district decided to invest some of those dollars to create programming, for example, with Southern Connecticut State University, where many of the paraprofessionals were able to go into programming. And many of them are right now in our classrooms having gained certification.
Now, that's an example of maybe a good investment from ESSER that you're not going to keep going when it runs out.
Correct.
Am I right that the reason Hartford is going to be laying off so many more people than we are, is it because they dedicated a higher percentage of their pandemic relief money to ongoing expenses rather than one-shot investments like that?
I wouldn't say that. Having been in Hartford, I don't know that was their strategy.
Why aren't we laying off as many people as they are?
I think it's because I had the opportunity to do the right sizing that I'm speaking about that had not been done here before. I think folks, for whatever reason, were not willing to make some of the changes, because change is hard, right? Change is hard for everybody. But I saw this as an opportunity, right? My thing was, how can I get closer and closer to mitigating our financial challenges without having people lose their jobs?
And we're talking to Dr. Madeline Negrón, who's the school superintendent of WNHH-FM. We broadcast from Elm Street in New Haven at 103.5, and we're live streamed at WNHH.org. One thing that greeted you like a not very welcome hello was the data hack that, it turned out someone had stolen, what was it, $6 million, and now it turns out a lot of personal. And again, I wasn't mad at you guys because I got hacked. I think we all don't pay as much attention as we need to with this constant multi-billion-dollar a year industry of fooling you to click on stuff. But what's happening since? So Thomas Lamb, your CEO, is on leave being investigated. You have Michael Carter came back to run as your temporary CEO. How are we dealing with the fallout of that and preventing that from happening again?
So first, I want to name that those things are not related. I want to make that very clear.
Okay.
But I do want to say, as you mentioned,
that's interesting. So that had nothing to do with
those
that?
are not related.
Okay.
What I do want to say is that was one of the surprises, right? I arrived here July 1st, and I learned that the system had been hacked. And immediately, jumped into action to be able to work through that. And I am very pleased of the measures that have been taken right now.
What are the measures? Because one of my understanding was, and again, I wasn't feeling judgmental about it because I know I haven't taken the same precautions. It seemed like there were some measures, procedures, and training that didn't happen beforehand. And
I think a lot could have been things, preventative things that could have happened, but a lot also having to do, ensuring that we have a stronger firewall that will prevent, right, folks from entering our system. So those are some of the pieces that have happened since then to be able to continue to strengthen the systems that we do have.
Well, someone was able to obtain one official's identity and pretend to be that person to bill.
That is correct, to kind of insert themselves
pretend
into...
they were the bus company and then get the money.
Insert themselves into a conversation.
So how do we stop that from happening again in addition to firewalls?
So I think, again, it's about procedures that happen. I think I have to make it very, very clear as well that a lot of the things happen not only on the Board of Education side, but also on the city side, right? There are protocols in which these financial situations happen. There are things at our end. There are things that happen at the city end. That's why it's so important to work together to ensure that we are strengthening the systems on both sides and the protocols that are there to ensure that the right people are the ones signing off on things or in the conversations.
How often do you get to leave meetings at Meadow Street and actually go into schools?
I prioritize that all the time.
Because I saw how much you enjoy being in the schools.
I think people will tell you that I am a very visible superintendent.
Do you make a point every week to go into schools?
I make a point to be in my schools. I make a point to be able to be around the students. I want to see the great work that our teachers are doing, and I want to see what the experiences are like for kids. At the end of the day, I remind folks, our business is education. I know that there are a lot of things intertwined in our business, but at the end of the day, we exist to make sure that kids like me that had no hope of ever breaking a cycle of poverty can break it and become something of themselves.
Is there a day that sticks out in your mind? There are probably many, where something happened in your first year and you say, this is why I do it, or this is the difference I can make, or this is why this is what the job's all about?
I have to say that when it was announced, right, that I would be the next superintendent, and the fact that I would be the first Latina ever to be in that role, that I know that it meant a lot for community. And I recall this spring going in to see our science fair. And all of a sudden I have a young lady eagerly coming, wanting to meet me. And it was this child just saying how much she believed that anything was possible.
She's Latina?
She's a Latina student.
So I remember that first day we went to Cross, and there were like 6 Latina students who went around you for a photo. Yeah. That's a real thing, huh?
It is, because I do know that the work that I do not only is going to help all of the 19,000 students that we serve, but I know for some students and for some families, it means that it's possible. It creates a sense of hope for them that they could do it in the skin that they live, in the language that they speak, in the culture that they're in, because I believe they see that hope in me.
Well, congratulations on finishing your first year without scandal, controversy, defying. You might be the longest served superintendent in America right now. And good luck on keeping that going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Harry Drost, the best station manager in the multiverse. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.